The grand jury, who is supposed to be meeting for its final set of debates before deciding whether or not to make the indictment, has been told to go home, either by their own recognizance or by Alvin Bragg. We will be talking a bit about all of the possibilities, what this means for the indictment, and what is happening going forward, along with some speculation as to why it is that they have canceled. So we'll go over some of that, talk about that, and what this means and where we go from there. In other news, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin have a summit in which both sides come away from it, saying that they have formed a strong alliance. What will this mean for the West? Is this true, or is it the reality of my friend Seawall that they actually just hate each other and this is for show? We'll talk about that, what's happening there, and what we do with that. Iran has been enriching uranium above 60% purity, which means that Israel says and swears that they could come back and strike Iran at any time, as if we needed another reason to be afraid of what's going to happen in this world. So we'll be going over some of that. And Nikki Fried takes aim at Ron DeSantis, and Piers Morgan comes back and levels her back out. It is going to be all this and more. I was the one flying the balloons. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. You know, I've never played Undertale, but I've always been curious about the game because, they talk a lot about that. And, I mean, the song that everybody seems to know, even the people who've never played the game, Megalovania, it is everywhere. And there are people who are just obsessed with the song for that game. I don't know if it's the main theme or anything about it. I just know a lot of people play it, especially if they do video game covers, and they seem to enjoy it. But we are not here to talk about the background music. We are here to talk about the news. And we have got a lot to go over here today over on Contemporary. Before we get started, make sure you guys go check out great programming, such as The Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Birkenhoff, The R-Rated Conservative, The Porch Boys. Go check out Tweets by Brit, Mr. Behavior, The No Gimmicks Podcast, and more, as we seek to bring you a better news experience from the common man for the common man. That is right. For too long, we have got our news from people who wear suits that cost more than our houses. No more, they say, as more outlets come out there. And not even just my outlet and the outlets of my friends. I mean, Hawkhound Media is doing well. I've debated talking to KTZed and seeing if they can come back and pick me up for some promotional things, just to see if we can't get my channel back up and back up to the point that it was when we were still doing the morning show. I don't know if they'd be willing to do that or not. We would see over that. I mean, I know at least one person on Hawkhound, so it's part of the reason that I stopped advertising for her on here, just because I don't want to step on Hawkhound's toes. I still like KTZed, I really do. But, you know, it's one of those promotional things, so that's what we have for that. But yeah, go check out all that great programming as we bring you a better experience of news, culture, religion, music, and a host of other things that for too long the big people out there who, again, are controlling it all with money have dominated for. It's time for a better way to look at things. It's time for a better start. It's time for a better source of information. And that's what we hope to provide over here with all that great programming. And let's get down into the news of the day. Let's have a look at our finance. Looking at the Dow. The Dow is down, and by quite a bit. Now, the Dow held fairly steady throughout the day, just kind of hovering around its previous close. It fell below, it went above, it fell below, and it was able to spike and claw its way back up before the Fed meeting. And then after the Fed meeting, the bottom just dropped out, and it was done. The Dow closing today at 32,030.11. That is down 530.49 points, or 1.63% on the day. So those of you who have your 401k stuck in the Dow, well, you didn't do very well today, unfortunately, but this is a day-to-day basis. We'll see what happens with that. Bitcoin also did not do very well today. Now, Bitcoin has been on a steady climb since the bank started to fail, Bitcoin was starting off today in the 28,000 range, but ended at 27,246.70. That is after shedding $953 and 60 US cents, or about 3.38% on the day. And a lot of this is, again, because people are wondering what's going to happen with the mainstream currency, and for the most part, you can't go out. Now, yes, it's good to see that people are putting their store, or their wealth rather, into a store other than something that is US dollar, even though Bitcoin is backed by the US dollar. But if you ever need to spend your Bitcoin, it has got to go back into the US dollar. So when people need the emergency groceries, the car repair, the diapers, etc., and it comes out of the Bitcoin, it first has to turn into US dollars again. So we will see what happens with that and where that goes. Looking at the gas prices around Madison, unchanged from the day before, although the BP on the north side is the one exception. That did drop down to 309. So do we see reprieve coming in the near future? We will have to sit and keep watching this and look over it day over day. Let's grab one from Investors Business Daily. Dow Jones falls 530 points as bank lead Fed sell-off. Apple, 5 tightens mask market weakness. From Ed Carson. Dow futures rose slightly after hours along with the S&P and the NASDAQ. The stock market rally attempt suffered a nasty downside reversal on Wednesday following the Fed meeting. KB Home and Coinbase were key movers late. The Federal Reserve raised rate hikes by a quarter and signaled just one more hike this year. Yeah, we've heard that story before. Soon after, Jerome Powell said he remains committed to fighting inflation, but also said that tighter conditions from bank woes take some pressure off monetary policy. Meanwhile, Treasury Secretary Yellen, testifying before a Senate panel, denied a report that regulators are considering expanding FDIC insurance to all deposits. On Tuesday, Yellen, Powell's predecessor as Fed chief, signaled regulators are ready to cover deposits more broadly at smaller banks if needed. Bank stocks struggled, notably First Republic Bancorp and PacWest Bancorp. More broadly, the market rally attempt had relied heavily on 6 megacaps: Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, Tesla, Meta, and Nvidia. They powered higher in recent weeks, masking a weak overall breadth. Apple, Google, and Meta are all actionable now, despite Wednesday's reversals. Microsoft is just below a buy point, while Tesla is setting up. Nvidia is significantly extended. Nvidia and Meta are on IBD leaderboard. Apple and Meta are on swing trader. Microsoft and Google are on the IBD long-term leaders. But even with these 6 megacaps, this is not yet a confirmed uptrend. Investors should still be cautious. On the rate hike, the Fed raised rates by a quarter point to 4.75 to 5% range as expected. New quarterly projections show policymakers expect the Fed's key interest rate in 2023 at 5.1%, implying one further rate hike. But even that isn't clear. The Fed policy statement said some additional policy firming may be appropriate, a little less hawkish from prior statements, language of ongoing rate increases. Fed Chief Powell said people should pay attention to may and some. The Fed rate outlook will depend greatly on the banking system. Jerome Powell, bank deposits are safe due at the Fed, FDIC, and Treasury, but he said that's too soon to tell how monetary policy should respond to banking stress. The statement also noted that banking woes are likely to result in tighter credit conditions. Powell said that means monetary policy has less to do. Investors still see rate cuts over the summer, even with Powell signaling that's unlikely. So, a few things to look at with this. Let's look quick at the futures. On the futures, Dow futures rose 0.2 versus fair value. The S&P climbed 0.2, and the NASDAQ climbed 0.1. And remember, overnight action in Dow futures and elsewhere doesn't necessarily translate into actual trading in the next regular stock market session. So that is what we have for that. Let's grab one from Fortune. As a second, we don't usually do 2 finance articles anymore, but as our second one, already past the point of no return, JP Morgan says the US is probably headed for a recession as economic engines are about to turn off. From Tristan Bove. A A series of banking crises this month, headlined by the failure of Silicon Valley Bank, has forced analysts from multiple banks, including JP Morgan Chase, to rewrite their recession forecast from scratch as months of small victories, fight against inflation, and a relatively strong economy were potentially swept away in under 2 weeks. Even if the government and the private sector are able to successfully contain contagion from the bank collapses spreading through the economy, the failure may still lead to lasting damage for the U.S. financial system. Some banks are teetering on the edge in Europe and the US, while jittery markets and the promise of a stricter regulation could lead to a credit crunch. A steep decline in banks' willingness to lend, caused by lack of funds. It adds up to an impossible choice the Federal Reserve has to make when officials meet on Wednesday. Slow down the pace of interest rate hikes or plow ahead to bring down restaurant inflation, or resurgent inflation, not restaurant inflation, and risk amplifying damage to the economy. But as far as the Fed is concerned, hopes of engineering a soft landing for the economy and avoiding a recession may already be in the rearview mirror. The Fed is facing a difficult task on Wednesday, but it's likely already past the point of no return. JP Morgan strategists, led by Marko Kolanovic, the bank's chief global market strategist, wrote in a note to clients on Monday. A soft landing now looks unlikely, with the airplane in a tailspin. Lack of market confidence and engines about to turn off. Bank lending. It is still unclear how far contagion from SVB will spread. New York-based Signature Bank failed days after SVB, requiring sweeping government measures to restore confidence that account holders in both banks would be made whole, but other small-sized and regional banks remain in precarious positions. San Francisco-based First Republic remains at a high risk, although larger U.S. banks banded together last week to provide a $30 billion deposit to prop up its finances. Janet Yellen also pledged Tuesday that the government was prepared to step in again if issues at other banks pose the risk of contagion. But even if depositors are safeguarded, the damage may have already been done. So, JP Morgan is starting to say that we're already there. My advice: hoe in another row, can some more, stock up on a few more things if you can. Don't draw yourself thin stocking up, of course, but if you can pick up an extra can of beans, or Spam, or vegetables, or something every time you go to the grocery store. It doesn't have to be a lot, but most of you go every week. So just that one additional can of something that doesn't go bad will put you in a better position if the bottom does fall out and you're affected. So that is what we see for that. And we've got the layoff report. In a show of pure irony on the layoff report, from KVUE ABC, Austin-based Indeed, the job posting website, cuts 2,200 jobs. I wonder how many of those people just put their jobs on, or their resumes on Indeed. Huh? Yeah, that was lame. From Sam Series, or Searles, rather. The Austin-based job search company, Indeed, has announced that 2,200 jobs are being cut. Indeed is yet another company joining the big names in the tech industry for mass layoffs. In a letter from CEO Chris Hyams, around 15% of the entire community has been cut. According to the letter, the cuts already affected nearly every team, function, and level from any Indeed location. The specific decisions on who and where to cut were extremely difficult, but they were made with great care. We focused on preparing the organization for the future, aligning with our strategy and priorities, and reducing duplication of effort and inefficiency. We work closely with HR, legal, and the DEIB+. Development, something, innovation, maybe, or is it diversity? I don't know. To ensure objectivity and equity in these, it's probably diversity actually. With what just immediately followed it, it's probably diversity. To ensure objectivity and equity in these decisions, the letter stated. The company sent out mass emails to every single employee with either the title that read, "Your position has been impacted," or "Your position has not been impacted." Those outside of the UK, Ireland, the Netherlands, and Japan have already been notified of their status, but those that reside in those countries will have to wait longer due to regional regulations. For those that have been laid off, their last official day is Wednesday, March 22nd. Well, that's today, but will receive regular pay through March 31st. The laid-off employees will have until March 26th to remove personal materials from their work laptop until it's remotely wiped, but former employees will be allowed to keep it for personal use. Hey, thanks for working for us. Have a laptop. That seems like a little bit of an underwhelming severance package. The severance package for laid-off employees includes the following according to the letter. 16 weeks of base salary or 2 weeks for every year of service, whichever is greater. 4 months of COBRA, accrued PTO, a cash payout equivalent to your RSUs, scheduled to vest on May 1st for employees whose initial grant date was August 1st, 2022 or later. You will receive a partial payout for RSUs that would vest in May 1st with the standard 1-year vesting cliff waived. The payout will be calculated at the closing stock price of February 1st. If the closing price on May 1st is higher, you will receive an additional payment for the difference. Access to ongoing career placement services for 6 months. For it being Indeed, that's like the least you can do. And access to ongoing mental health services for 12 months. I mean, you do hate to see the layoffs happening over and over again, especially given the fact that that was supposed to be the savior job. You know, learn to... I still don't know if I can say that on YouTube or not. But that was the advertisement under the Obama years. Hey, if you're about to lose your position, learn how to program a computer. Get out of that position. And then when news people started getting laid off under Trump, when we started saying that back to the news people who pushed that the first time, well, then at that point there was a point where it started getting banned on YouTube because it was harassing to journalists. And that's why I don't know if I can say it right now, but you know, maybe learning to do that in programming computers, maybe that wasn't the answer, as so many of these companies seem to have overhired. But that's what we have for that. Let's get into the main news of the day. Breaking from MSDNC.
Yeah, Andrea, just as we come on the air, our colleague Jonathan Dietz reporting that the grand jury won't meet today. It's worth reminding folks that all these grand jury proceedings are conducted in secret. That includes the schedule. You know, we know from past patterns that this grand jury typically meets on Monday afternoons and on Wednesday afternoons. But as is usually the case, you know, most of the time we don't know for sure when they meet until afterwards. Some of this can be based on witness availability. Some of it can be based on the availability of prosecutors or the folks who need to be in the room. Some of it can be making sure they have a quorum of grand jurors present to hear the necessary evidence. So we're working to find out more about the delay today and why the grand jury is not meeting today after they had a busy day Monday, suggesting that perhaps they were closer to the end of this probe than they were to the beginning. Now, as for the reaction in Mar-a-Lago, I've not seen any to this decision not to have the grand jury meet today, but I suspect, based on my other reporting, it will be welcomed by the former president down in South Florida. The reporting from the New York Times that you mentioned, also reporting that I and my other colleagues have been able to do, is that the former president's somewhat conflicted about all this. So he may be personally uncomfortable with the idea of being indicted. Nobody particularly wants to, be fingerprinted or have to go through the criminal justice system, but that he also recognizes the political opportunity it presents to rally his base to him, to be part of a spectacle, to be part of the biggest story on the planet, which the first ever indictment and arrest of a former president would probably qualify as, if and when we get to that moment. But Andrea, it appears we're at least another day off from that possibility. And I can tell you today, after what was a lot of buildup and a lot of energy around the courthouse in the last couple of days, it's simply much quieter here today. The protests that had been planned over the last couple of days had fizzled out. The kind of circus environment that follows the global media when we set up shop on a corner like this one has fizzled out here a little bit. And now we're back into a posture of waiting and wondering what, if anything, is going on the fourth floor of the prosecutor's office behind me.
So that is it. That is right. It was shut down for the day. Shut it down, as Midget B's meme says. And, Well, just 2 more weeks ballooning on, right? I mean, we've gone from it's certainly going to happen on Tuesday. Welcome to Arrestmas, everybody. To now we just go home on Wednesday and not do anything. There are some scant details about this, and there's a lot of rumors. We'll be going over some of this. But yeah, it's not happening today. And in fact, again, the grand jury is not going to be meeting. Let's grab one from NBC4 out of New York. Manhattan DA tells Trump grand jury to stay home Wednesday. Reasons unclear. Unnamed sources. From Jonathan Dienst, Melissa Russo, Mark Santia, Jennifer Millman, and Miles Miller. And Tony Shea. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people to write one article. The Manhattan DA has told the grand jury, weighing on potential charges against former President Trump, to stay home Wednesday, rather than reconvene as planned, according to 2 sources familiar with the matter. 2 sources familiar with the matter said that DA Bragg is planning to bring the grand jury back on Thursday to continue their work. The reason for this delay is unclear, including whether it may involve another potential witness to be heard on Monday. The grand jury, which had, according to multiple sources, had been prepared as of Friday to issue an indictment decision, as early as this week heard from Trump ally Robert Costello, who sought to discredit the prosecution's key witness, former fixer and personal attorney Michael Cohen. They had been scheduled to reconvene on Wednesday afternoon. Bragg's office declined to comment later in the day, saying it couldn't speak on grand jury matters, which is true, by the way. That is all supposed to be secret. The proceedings have been shrouded in secrecy because that's how they're designed to be shrouded. That's what they're supposed to do. Luke Wee is here, and we've got a couple lurkers too, so pop in and say hi. NBC News confirmed prosecutors were upset with Cohen's appearance on Ari Melber's MSDNC show and reached out to his attorney to tell him Cohen should not make any further TV appearances. The latest developments come 5 days after Trump's announced to the world he expected to be arrested and urged his supporters to protest in New York City, where throngs of fully uniformed NYPD, Secret Service, and other officers secured the Manhattan Criminal Court perimeter ahead of a possible grand jury indictment. So, not a lot. Again, there's a lot of speculation, but not a lot what's going on here. I want to address something that's been talked about on Twitter for the past few hours. And that is the fact that somebody brought up, in I think one of the tweets that I have up here, the fact that there was a grand jury convened without an arrest and he needs to go brush up on his legalese. This is actually a special grand jury. This is not the official arraignment grand jury, which would meet and convene after the fact. This is a special grand jury that is going for a specific high-profile case to look into and vote on whether Alvin Bragg has enough evidence to go forward with an indictment, which has been the major question at play here. It's the same, by the way, as the special grand jury in Georgia, who wasn't specifically going for an indictment of Trump himself or one person, but who were coming together to review the evidence to see if there was enough case to make an arrest and indictment on anybody. This is the same situation that we're in New York City right now. And after the arraignment, there will be another grand jury that will actually do the proper indictment. So, New York Post adding to this one here, chaos at court as Trump grand jury hearing canceled. Bragg now concerned about indictment, and ADAs are shaking their heads. From Elizabeth Rosner, Bruce Golding, and Larry Salona, and Joe Marino. The Manhattan grand jury hearing evidence against former President Trump in the Stormy Daniels hush money case didn't reconvene Wednesday as scheduled, court officials told the Post. The afternoon session was unexpectedly canceled by Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg, the sources said. Members of the panel were told to stay home and be on standby for Thursday, a law enforcement source said. The move, which forestalls a potentially unprecedented indictment of the 45th president in connection with the payment of $130,000 to Stormy Daniels, came because an unidentified witness was unable to appear, sources said. The witness is believed to be someone who will rebut Monday's testimony from lawyer and Trump ally Robert Costello, sources said. The grand jury was put on standby because it was unclear whether the witness would be available Thursday, a source said. But court workers began making preparations late Wednesday afternoon for the testimony to take place Thursday, a source said. All unnamed, of course. Wednesday's turn of events came as a source with ties to the Manhattan DA's office told The Post that DA Alvin Bragg was concerned following Costello's testimony. The last thing that he wants is for the grand jury to vote against him, the source said. He wants a no doubt about it case. He's pressuring the Trump obsessed to step up and prove the case. Really? That doesn't sound right. A source inside Bragg's office said that a substantial number of assistant DAs were shaking their heads over Bragg's decision to pursue Trump, 76. They don't understand how this case is going forward, a source said. These ADAs are not fans of Trump, but they are professional lawyers and know the law. Fox also reported a major dissension inside Bragg's office, with one source saying the weakness of the evidence against Trump was posing problems for prosecutors. A spokesperson for Bragg declined to comment, saying in an email, "We can't confirm or comment on grand jury matters." The $130,000 payment to Daniels in October 2016, shortly before Trump's shock victory over Hillary Clinton, was admittedly arranged by former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen to cover up Daniels' alleged 2006 affair with Trump, who's denied cheating on his wife Melania with her. And we've got review after this. So there again, there's some speculation as to what's happening here. It's kind of telling, and again, this is an unnamed source. Take this with a grain of salt. Take this with a boulder of salt at this point. But take this with a little bit of skepticism, because this is not somebody that can be named. However, if it is true, then we are seeing a point of possible desperation, a point of the fact that he, whether it be for the points within the Democrat Party, whether it be for his own career going forward or his own ability to be reelected as DA or reappointed as DA, a lot of this probably hinges on what he claims that he can do. And again, with a grain of salt, but if true, then we've also got the fact of the matter that we're sitting here looking at a situation where there just isn't the evidence, and the grand jury is getting ready to go back against him and say no. So, hey, go find anybody who's Trump obsessed who will get back up and testify in front of this grand jury and tell them how much they hate Trump. Now, there is, and we'll be talking about this a little bit later, an argument about exculpatory evidence that Alvin Bragg withheld. Kind of want to push against that a little bit before we talk about that, but that's not what this is. Now, what we saw in the January 6th committee, while being closer to what a trial actually is, what we saw there was more about, it was the closest most of us are going to see to what a grand jury actually does, especially a special grand jury, where evidence is presented one-sidedly. But they do it in secret for a reason. Because if you're expecting to have a criminal trial, you don't want to put your evidence out in front of a potential defense attorney. You sit there, you present evidence to the special grand jury, they decide whether or not there's enough evidence to go forward. Usually you don't need to go through that part, but when you've got a very, very weak case, like Alvin Bragg appears to do, they've actually got to sit down and make the decision as to whether or not they can go through with this. Or whether or not this will, in essence, just fall apart on the plate. It'll be like a cake in that matter. It'll crumble right on the plate. To borrow a little bit from an old Casey at the Bat poem. But there is no responsibility to bring forward exculpatory evidence. That's the defense's job, not the prosecution's job. The special grand jury works specifically with the prosecution to look at this and make the decision on whether or not this is able to be prosecuted or not. So things like Marjorie Taylor Greene saying Alvin Bragg should go to jail over it may not have the legs that Marjorie thinks that it has. Let's grab one from CNN. Unclear if New York hush money grand jury will meet Thursday as Trump legal drama reaches fever pitch. From Jeremy Herb, Karen Scannell, Paula Reed, John Miller, Kristen Holmes, and Caitlin Palance. The extraordinary legal peril surrounding Trump is reaching a fever pitch at the same time the former president is forging ahead with a 2024 Republican primary that's increasingly dominated by criminal investigations in New York, Washington, and Atlanta. But there's no public information as to when or whether an indictment could be filed, leaving the former president and public in suspense. The Manhattan grand jury that has been hearing evidence in the Trump case will not meet on Wednesday, according to a source familiar with the case. Alvin Bragg's office suggested an attorney for at least one witness in the past 24 hours that they might need to provide more testimony to the grand jury in its hush money probe, according to one source familiar with the probe. Expectations are high that Bragg is getting ready to make the decision on a potential indictment against Trump any day now. That's right, Blue and On, any day, over a hush money payment scheme to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Bragg has said little about the status of the probe or whether Trump will even be charged. The Manhattan grand jury has typically heard testimony on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. However, it's not yet clear whether it will meet on Thursday. Two sources told CNN that the grand jury is on standby, but has not yet gotten the call to come in. There's not an urgent deadline for prosecutors as the grand jury sits until June. As the investigation nears its final stages, the prosecutors are considering the historic nature of prosecuting a former president, an unprecedented act, sources tell CNN. Other sources tell CNN the DA's office is taking a moment to regroup after the events of this past week. Now, and there are some other things that are going on with this. It's not just about the evidence or the slam dunk case or anything. Well, it is about the slam dunk case. One of the things that I've noticed about this is the fact, well, number one, this is happening in New York, in Manhattan, in deep, deep blue Manhattan. And that's been brought up, by the way, a lot by many of the people who are observing this, many of the people who are watching this in the beginning, that this is happening. And this was brought up by me even when I talked about people going to protest. When you go to protest, if somebody starts breaking windows and your phone gets pinged and you're within 7.5 miles of where the protest happened, and your phone happens to ping, and you have ever said one thing on Twitter in support of Donald Trump, or your Facebook or anything else, then you will be arrested and you will be made to sit in front of this particular judge and a jury who will be all but eager to throw you in prison just for the fact that you voted for Donald. The reality here is people have brought up Georgia, saying that it's a more slam dunk case in Georgia and they should be waiting on this one and letting the payments and the election interference go through Georgia first. I think there's a lot of fear that the one in Georgia isn't going to go anywhere. Meanwhile, they're sitting here hoping to get this one in Manhattan past a grand jury who is supposed to be allied with them in their hatred for Trump, and just supposed to come back out and rubber stamp and say take it to trial, because the hope is that it gets prosecuted by extreme progressive anti-Trump Alvin Bragg in front of an extreme progressive anti-Trump judge. And in Manhattan, it cannot be difficult to find 12 extreme progressive anti-Trump jurors to present this in front of. Anywhere in Georgia, that's going to be a much, much more mixed bag. And even in DC, that's going to be a difficult... I don't even know of an investigation going on in DC. CNN claims that there is one. The DC one, it would be almost the one that I would go with more. In another blow to Trump's legal team, Trump defense attorney Evan Corcoran is scheduled to testify Friday before the grand jury investigating classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago. After a new order from a federal appeals court, a source familiar with the matter told CNN that's probably the one that's happening in D.C. So we'll be talking about that a little bit later. So, CNN is telling you, oh, this is a slam dunk, they're going ahead with it. Reuters saying that the probe is expected to resume in New York, says a grand jury. No timeline as to when. Let's skip this one. Let's grab one from The Hill instead. Mystery surrounds possible Trump indictment. From Zach Schoenfield and Brett Samuels. Former President Trump set off a frenzy a few days ago when he declared, without any official word, that he would be arrested on Tuesday. But the case against him in Manhattan has yet to turn up an indictment, lending an air of mystery to if and when the former president will be charged. Reports emerged earlier Wednesday that the grand jury hearing evidence in the probe would not convene on Wednesday. Fox News reported that at least one more witness was expected to appear on Wednesday before the grand jury, which is hearing evidence about the 2016 hush money payment. Although Alvin Bragg has taken a series of steps in recent days that suggest he will likely soon seek an indictment, no official word has emerged on that possibility from his office. Yeah, and 3 days ago we were saying that it was a definite. They had him. They had him this time. It was happening on Tuesday. MAGA hat wearers, go and get yourself to New York on Tuesday. Make sure you protest. You won't do it, no balls. Just ignore the fact that you don't know this person who's handing you a brick. He has your best interest in heart. And there is an air of mystery about this. An interesting side note to this one here from Axios: Democrats see downside in Trump's New York case. From Alexei McCammond. Democrats have longed for former President Trump to be held accountable under law, but some fear that Trump's first big legal test could be a political loser for them and undermine more significant cases against him. An indictment over an alleged campaign finance violation would make Trump the first former U.S. president to face criminal charges, but even his critics say it's a risky case that could amount to a mere record-keeping infraction. Conversations with prosecutors, Democrat Party officials, and other Trump critics reveal concerns about the legal merits and political perils of the case being pushed by Alvin Bragg. David Pepper, former chair of the Ohio Democrat Party, says there are far more serious crimes that he should also be held to account. Okay, we'll convene a grand jury in Ohio and press a charge. David Pepper. Norm Eisen, attorney and senior Brookings Fellow, told reporters on a press call on Monday, the case against Trump is open and shut, books and records misdemeanor. Now to elevate to a felony is more complicated. We talked about that on Monday. Some Democrats worry that if Trump were to beat charges similar to what Democrat John Edwards was acquitted of in 2012, it could make it easier for Trump's team to cast any future charges as a witch hunt, which is actually true. So, and yet still blue and on, Brooklyn, Jersey, my wife's son Reliant, and Jojo from Joyce, and probably Tiedrick, even though I'm blocked by him and I can't see it in Palmer Report, were all jizzing all over themselves on Monday saying, it's happening on Tuesday, it's happening, there are going to be protests, we're going to arrest so many more Trump supporters. Let's grab one from the Daily Wire. He manipulated everybody. The View hosts are mad everyone fell for Trump's arrest claims. From Virginia Kruta. And we've got just one clip from that. Hosts of The View spent part of Wednesday's show complaining that too many people, themselves included, had been fooled by former President Trump's assertion he would likely be arrested on Tuesday. Let's listen, and then I'm going to weigh in on this a little bit as to the strategy of this.
And I want to start this with this update. You know who is still at large.
He is.
Yes, he is.
He is.
Yes.
He hasn't been arrested.
No.
Like he predicted.
Well, you kind of have to weigh it with all the other stuff he said. And you figure, well, you said you won the election, you didn't win.
Good point.
You said they're coming to arrest you. They didn't arrest you.
I said that to Joy, but why do we start believing him now?
It's kind of crazy.
He manipulated everybody. We all rose to the occasion. The papers, everybody just went there.
So many people were excited.
He's a liar.
Yeah.
He's a liar.
Are you shocked?
No, it annoys me every time.
I know.
No, it annoys me every time. He's a liar. He's always been a liar. We were taken in and we thought for sure he was going to get arrested. We were going to be able to show his orange jumpsuited ass on The View. But he's a lawyer. So, and I've been thinking about this for a little while. Why? Why would he bring this up? Without full knowledge that it was about to happen. Without planning a trip to New York. And part of the question is if he was looking to see if he could whip up a furor and a frenzy of his supporters. But there were a couple other things that went about this. Number one, it's the fundraising emails. As soon as this all happened, a series of fundraising emails went out. I got one. Because I just happened to go once and get tickets to a Trump rally. I got one of those fundraising emails. I'm on their mailing list now. I used to be on their text message list too, but I got that shit shut off. But I got the fundraising email. That all went out. Your favorite president is about to be indicted by a criminal witch hunt. Empty your pockets, patriots. Yeah, no. Not going to happen. Not for me. I can think of better things to spend $40 on. Like Assassin's Creed. Black Flag. Coming up, if I ever sit down and finish Legend of Zelda, but yeah, for the last couple weekends, or the next few weekends, I'll be at my dad's, so that's probably not going to happen, but, that's a better way to spend $40. Great Patriots, open up your wallets. But there's another reason to this. Now, this probe has been going on for a long time, in secret. Alvin Bragg has been going through questioning witnesses. Like, this has been going on for a long time, just about since it came down with no indictments from Letitia James's office. And instead she had to go for a civil suit. When did this probe actually start? Let me check into that. When did the Stormy Daniels probe start? A timeline. CBS has a timeline here. But they're going to paywall it, so... I know this has been going for several months. Years-long probe, is what they say. But regardless, this has been going on in secret for a while. With basically a will they, won't they, and a number of witnesses who are able to come forward because of the secret nature of the grand jury. And just come in and testify and nobody pays attention. Now, Donald Trump himself, releasing this on Saturday, was not the first of this. It was actually NBC News that came out and reported this first, that the arrest was imminent. And then the Krappenstein brothers came out and immediately started talking about it, which, was what led to Saturday's announcement and all the fun that we had over the weekend with that. But realistically, with the Saturday announcement, it blew the air of secrecy off this. Now, everybody in America both knows that it's potential to happen, that they're winding down on it. We get news updates when they don't come in and meet at their regular time. When the witnesses are coming in, sometimes who the witnesses are. And the secrecy of the entire thing has gone away. Even speculation as to what is being said behind the closed doors, both with interviews and talks with people after leaving the interviews, and speculation because of who the people are. There's no more secrecy to this, which means Alvin Bragg, at this point, he can't just sit on this until June, when it's over, which is only a few months away. He is being put under pressure both from Republicans and Democrats, ADAs, and a host of other people to put up or shut up. And trust me, after seeing the big riots in 2020, there is an equal chance that he is getting pressure from the left to make sure that he puts up and not shuts up. Whereas, realistically, with the Stormy Daniels thing, before Saturday, if he had not managed to find anything, and if, like yesterday, if the DAs or the grand jury had voted against him, he would have been able to just put the case to bed and silently not ever seen it. Just like, this happened? No, we'll just ignore this and pretend that we never got any closure. Now it's out in the open. Now people are waiting for it. Yes, even on the left, people are waiting for it. Telling us that it's going to happen. It's just 2 more weeks blowing on. And Alvin Bragg can no longer put this to bed quietly. No matter how much he tries or if the grand jury votes against him, he cannot put this to bed quietly. And if it was NBC News that was driving it before Donald Trump got to it, it could be for the same reason, to make sure that the grand jury, knowing full well that left-wing rioters won't see jail time and have no problem putting a Molotov through the window of wherever it is that they meet, which they will find out where they meet. I don't know where they meet, but the left-wing agitators will find out where they meet and put a Molotov through the window if they're not placated by an arrest from Donald Trump, which puts an inordinate amount of pressure on the New York grand jury to actually put up and not vote against Bragg. So either way, there may be some nefarious, and yes, even coming from Trump's camp, some very, very nefarious planning behind doing this. This is a very interesting case because of the people involved and the view of the people involved. From CNN, Trump's team puts forward an ally in hopes of undercutting Cohen testimony in New York hush money case. From Jack Forrest and Zachary Cohen. The grand jury impaneled as part of the investigation into Trump's alleged role in the scheme to pay hush money to Stormy Daniels on Monday heard from a potentially key witness to put forward by the former president's legal team. Robert Costello, an attorney who has previously represented Trump allies like Steve Bannon and Rudolph M. Giuliani, testified before the grand jury in New York for nearly 3 hours on Monday afternoon after appearing at the request of the former president's legal team. Costello was expected to offer evidence that contradicts testimony provided by Michael Cohen, who was admitted to paying the $130,000 to Daniels just before the 2016 election to stop her from going public. I've listened to Michael Cohen stand in front of the courthouse and say things that are directly contrary to what he said to us, Costello said Monday after his appearance before the grand jury. Let them see exactly who Michael Cohen is and was at the moment, Costello added, referring to the grand jury. Now he's on the revenge tour. I understand it, but I don't condone it. And that's why I went in there today to tell these people who the real Michael Cohen is and what he was actually saying at the moment in time. Costello's appearance is unusual for grand jury proceedings, particularly because he was previously served as Cohen's legal advisor. The Manhattan DA's office has signaled they are closing in on a decision on whether or not to indict. Trump on Saturday said he expects to be arrested this week in connection with the years-long case and called on his supporters to protest any such move, prompting security concerns in New York City. And again, I remind you, don't do that. There are FBI agents and Secret Service agents and CIA agents and local police and Capitol Police and state police and a whole host of other people that want to put you in a box and charge you with a felony and make sure that you can't vote again if they don't kill you outright and make you vote Democrat instead. Oops, did I say that out loud? From Fox News. This is an op-ed from Greg Jarrett. The opinions expressed in this article are not necessarily the opinions of Fox News, Contemporary, Turns the Pages Productions, or your host, J. Edgar. They are solely the opinions of Greg Jarrett. The sudden turn of events that could derail Trump's indictment. Show me the man and I'll show you the crime was the infamous boast of Joseph Stalin's ruthless secret police chief, Lavrentiy Beria. His modus operandi was to target any man the Soviet director chose and then find or fabricate a crime against him. Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg has taken the page out of Stalin's playbook and targeted Trump. Driven by personal and political animus, the DA presumed the former president must be guilty of something. It was just a matter of devoting enough time and resources to hunt down the crime. Failing to find one, Bragg copied Beria's paradigm and simply dreamed one up. As I explained in my last column, the DA invented his case against Trump by taking an alleged misdemeanor business records violation and supercharging it into a felony by citing an imagined second crime arising out of a supposed campaign finance violation. The novelty of such a charge succeeded only by its absurdity. Unlike the continuum transfunctioner, whose mystery is only exceeded by its power. Damn it, now I want to watch that movie. An indictment appears to hinge on the DA's argument that a 2016 payment made to Stormy Daniels was intended to help Trump's presidential bid and should have been accounted for as a campaign contribution, not legal fees, when he reimbursed his then lawyer Michael Cohen, who paid Daniels to keep her mouth shut about a purported 2006 affair Trump vigorously denies. Confused yet? You should be. The flaw in Bragg's tortured logic is twofold. First, NDAs in exchange for money are perfectly legal. Second, Cohen long ago stated that the payment had nothing to do with the campaign, but was made to protect Melania from an embarrassing, albeit false, accusation. As such, it is not illegal campaign donation under law, hence there is no crime. It appears that Bragg's star witness is none other than Cohen, who performed an astonishing pirouette. By recanting his earlier statements, he now claims that the money was intended to help Trump's campaign fend off a damaging story. I don't know why. The pussy tape came out afterwards and didn't do a damn thing. Reliance on such a disreputable character as Cohen is a clear sign of the DA's desperation. Cohen's hatred of Trump is well known. He has carved out a career of trashing his former boss. Cohen's always had a warped relationship with the truth. Well, he's a lawyer. I like my lawyer, but I understand what she does. He peddled so many lies that there's no way to know whether the disgraced and disbarred lawyer even understands the concept of honesty. Among the smorgasbord of crimes that sent him to prison was lying to Congress. In a sudden turn of events, Cohen's former attorney, Robert Costello, no longer bound by the attorney-client privilege that was waived by his ex-client, testified before the grand jury Monday, according to Costello. In April of 2018, Cohen repeatedly stated that Daniels' payment was intended to protect the candidate's wife, not the campaign. Moreover, Cohen insisted that he acted all on his own and not at the behest of Trump. While testifying for over 2 hours, Costello said he realized that Bragg had been hiding from the grand jury nearly all the files he had previously turned over to the DA that corroborated Cohen's original testimony. Concealing exculpatory evidence from a grand jury is reprehensible conduct, but the overarching question is, was Cohen lying at the outset of the investigation, or is he lying now? I doubt even he knows. Inveterate liars tend to lose track of all their lies. That doesn't matter, actually, whether he was lying first or lying second. The fact that he has, under oath, told 2 different stories means that there is indeed reasonable doubt. There is an incredible amount of reasonable doubt in this case. I couldn't think, unless, again, you are coming and bringing forward a completely anti-Trump, we hate Trump, and actually coming in and vetting people to be Trump haters, which is not above the purview of Alvin Bragg. But unless you are specifically doing that, there's enough reasonable doubt that any judge worth his bar license would throw this out. So we'll see. This is interesting. Another interesting twist in this: Paul Sperry breaking anti-Trump DA Alvin Bragg's wife, Jamila Ponton Bragg, has locked her Twitter page, changing her account status from open to protected. For several years, J. Ponton Bragg has railed against Trump and retweeted posts calling him racist and advocating for his arrest. Now, with that being said, and then there was, this is why I found this, because of the announcement that the grand jury was not going to be meeting today. But with that being said, the interesting relationship between an attorney or judge or justice's wife and her opinions versus his opinions comes out into light. And now we have to wonder if she's going to get the same treatment as Jeannie Thomas did. I mean, we all know the answer. We don't actually have to wonder that. We know the answer to that. But it's an interesting concept now, in reality, whether or not she would be getting different treatment or not under a just system. And yes, of course, that is locked down. A little bit of Cope and Seethe from Time magazine. He betrayed us! Why Trump's call to protest is flopping. We'll read a little bit of what they have to say, and then, of course, you guys already know the real reason. Trump's call to supporters to protest his possible indictment by Manhattan DA has led officials to tighten security in New York and Washington and raise fears of potential violence. But Trump's exhortations were largely met with reluctance from both prominent supporters and the far-right online acolytes who responded to his rallying cry on January 6, 2021. Which I will remind you, in November of 2020, I told you not to go. It's a trap. A demonstration on Monday organized by the New York Young Republicans Club outside Manhattan Court, where Trump would be arraigned if indicted, drew barely 50 people. New York Young Republicans, I admire what you're doing, by the way, but I would find a different place to do that if it was me. I'm just saying, I would find somewhere else. Only a handful of supporters showed up outside his Mar-a-Lago residence in Florida, according to local reports. Distrustful the protests might be traps set by federal law enforcement, and without a fixed date or event to rally around, the vast majority of pro-Trump online groups seem to waver between apathy and confusion, showing very little appetite for organized action. He's not infallible, and protest is very vague, one person wrote in a popular MAGA Telegram group. And what exactly does protest mean? Another person asked in a different group. I'm not trying to be a jerk about it, but when you'd think that he could give us slightly more explicit instructions if he really wanted tens of millions of people who support him to do something effective. While there were usual mentions of civil war and apocalyptic language about using violence to take the country back, mostly posted by feds, that have become commonplace in far-right channels because they're feds. Polls in these groups asking followers if they would protest for Trump overwhelmingly found their members opposed. While far-right groups see Trump's possible arrest as a politicized prosecution, they mostly advised each other to stay home. I think protest is bad advice from Trump, read one post on a pro-Trump forum. Unless you're willing to actually and truly do an insurrection, taking all the oppressors prisoner or worse, there is no point to protest here. That was a Fed post, by the way. None of the prominent Trump supporters who played key roles in organizing rallies and protests in the past stepped up either, with many of them publicly declaring that they were staying out of it. I'm retired, Allie Alexander, and a right-wing activist and key organizer of the 2020 rallies that led to the Selfie Fest, wrote in a post on Telegram. Alexander said he had spoken to Alex Jones, a prominent conspiracy theorist involved in the January 6th Selfie Fest, He's not protesting either. We've both got enough going on fighting the government, he wrote. No billionaires covering our bills. The muted response highlights the lack of enthusiasm for and widespread distrust of mass protests after the January 6th Selfie Fest, which led to more than 1,000 prosecutions. A review of more than 24 popular pro-Trump Telegram channels, online forums, and social media groups also suggest many supporters feel betrayed by what they see as former president's abandonment of those who rallied for him on January 6, 2021. Why would I protest for a man that left January 6 protesters high and dry? One user posted in a pro-Trump Telegram group. Trump did nothing to help them after they stuck their neck out for him. He has called for protest about these poor guys. Nobody's calling for us to protest about his arrest, another person wrote. It doesn't sit right with me, another user agreed. He's right, Trump betrayed the January 6 patriots. How can anybody still support him? Yeah, those are fortunately outliers, and major outliers. The main sentiment behind everything that's happening that's against going in and protesting for this is the fact that enough people know that, number one, after the Gretchen Whitmer arrest, or attempted arrest, we found out, by the way, with Uvalde and the Buffalo shooter as well, that there are both agents and former agents that sit in Discord servers and Telegram channels that try to goad people into doing this kind of stuff. I make fun of it, not my Discord, which if you're not in, you should join. Link in the description below, or if we actually get a conversation going on the Twitch side, it'll start scrolling past you on the Twitch side as well. Link in the description. Go join the Discord if you are not there already. But I said, there's a topic chat that mods and myself can start topics in. And I had started one talking about this, and I said, I've changed my mind, Patriots. We must, all Patriots, go to both the Capitol and New York and protest the arrest of our great leader. Please tell me, you're confirm to me that you're going there by talking directly into my chest, please. Thank you. Indicating what these people are. They're in there trying to push people to go back and do things, either to get them killed and unable to vote for Trump, or arrested with a felony and unable to vote for Trump. It is a trap. They want to see more of you arrested. It's sad to say the government wants to see more of you arrested for voting the wrong way. And they're not immune from BLM or Antifa rallies either, by the way. The same agents are probably sitting in the same chat rooms, Telegram channels, Twitter feeds, etc., and telling everybody that they have to go to Kenosha or Minneapolis or Washington, D.C. to go and protest there, while their infiltrators are out there putting bricks out for people. One thing our government knows how to do, and it's been doing since our founding, is to stage a goddamn protest to get a political end. Whether it's separating themselves from the country that owns them back in 1776, or whether it's trying to get a political opposition taken out of the picture, as in 2021. But they know how to stage a goddamn protest. Another one from Twitter here, which will correspond to a CNN article, and I think the last one on New York, by the way. From our friends, our child-loving friends, the Lincoln Project. The grifters in the GOP are so desperately playing defense for Trump because they know that if Trump is held accountable for their actions, then they will be too. Make no mistakes, birds of a feather will be indicted together. Which I think my quote will come to the top. No, mine didn't come to the top. Oh, but there it is right there. Where I pointed out, they might as well just say it. Birds of a feather will be indicted together. We're using the DOJ to eliminate opposition. The article, they are citing from CNN, House GOP uses its new power in an extraordinary effort to shield Trump from indictment. Op-ed from Stephen Collinson. Trump's Republican allies in the House are doing what the former president taught them to do: use the government power to try to keep his legal threats at bay. The editorialization, and this is an op-ed, which they're disguising as an analysis, but the editorialization always gives me a godforsaken headache. After Trump warned that he could be arrested, his allies have been using their new House majority to demand Alvin Bragg's testimony and seek to thwart his investigation relating to an alleged hush money payment to adult film star before the 2016 election. And this goes right along with the mainstream media's ability to change everything from what the actual charge is into sex, for reasons of basically propagandization. In fact, the House GOP appears to be using the exact same tactic. They accuse the Biden admin, Bragg, and any other investigators on Trump's trail of employing, weaponizing the powers of the government to advance a partisan political end. Yet there are also sufficient doubts about a possible prosecution assembled by Bragg, and the unusual nature of potential charges relating to business and electoral law violations to fuel questions from nonpartisan legal experts about the case perhaps not living up to its billing. This is an especially fateful issue, given the gravity of any potential case against a former president. Let's talk about that for a second. But I mean, we know everything else in this article. Orange Man is bad. Oh, they're using the government because they want an investigation into this and that and the next thing. And oh my God, they're going to eliminate the opposition. And oh my God, and oh my God. But let's talk about the language about this. And this has been noted in the Times, CNN, Fox even, The Hill, Axios, they're all guilty of the same thing. They're trying to focus all of this onto the payment, which they did this in the Clinton persecution too. A lot of people think that Bill Clinton was impeached for getting blown by an intern under the desk in the Oval Office. And that's not the case. Bill Clinton committed perjury under oath, which was the charge that was brought forward for him about his use of power, and in the Paula Jones case, along with the Monica Lewinsky investigation. He testified and he perjured himself. But the news media, and Rush Limbaugh pointed this out. I'll use the Rush Limbaugh voice for this one because he was always the one to come out about this. None of this was about the sex in the Bill Clinton case. And if even Rush, far right, trying to appeal to Christian nationalist Rush Limbaugh is telling you it wasn't about the sex, it wasn't about the sex. And I can tell you that. And he would say, absolutely, he would come out and say, and the stuffed shirt Republicans, they only care about the fact that Bill Clinton was having fun in the Oval Office. Which is, and even me, being as young as I was when this was happening, could see this. I didn't realize that this was a perjury charge until I was 25. And actually looked into it because it had been brought up in a conversation. I had always assumed, because of the way the mainstream media had presented it, when I was like 11 or 12 when it was happening. I was older than that, wasn't I? I know I was still in middle school. I know that. But when that was all brought up at the time, yeah, I legitimately thought that it was all about the sex. I had no idea whatsoever that it was about the perjury, the lying, the under oath. Because that was the only thing that they talked about. That was legitimately the only thing that was ever talked about. And this is the same thing with this. The charge is a misdemeanor that's being elevated to a felony by basically taking it across state lines and attaching campaign finance to it. But all they can talk about, because that's what they all want to talk about, is the Stormy Daniels payment, the hush money, trying to shut up a porn star because he cheated on Melania. You evil Christian bigots would hate anybody else for this, but he cheated on Melania. And, well, it's not a reality. As was pointed out by the Daily Wire, an NDA, a hush money payment, is not against the law. People use that all the time. Alright, and on the other side, the last one that we talked about the former president on, from CNN, Trump attorney to testify Friday in Mar-a-Lago classified documents investigation after losing appeal from Caitlin Palance and Caitlin Collins. Former President Trump's defense attorney Evan Corcoran is scheduled to testify Friday before the grand jury investigating documents found at Mar-a-Lago after a new order from a federal appeals court. A source familiar with the matter told CNN. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals said that Corcoran must provide additional testimony and turn over documents about the former president as part of the criminal investigation into possible mishandling of classified documents. The source said Trump's side is unlikely to appeal to the Supreme Court. The announcement from the panel of 3 judges in the appeals court, less than a day after Trump sought to put Corcoran's testimony on hold, adds momentum to the special counsel investigation as it seeks to secure evidence that could make or break federal criminal case against Trump. The DOJ has successfully argued in court that prosecutors have enough evidence that Trump's interactions with a lawyer were part of a possible crime that he can pierce the confidentiality of the conversations between the two. The documents at issue in the case are Corcoran's handwritten notes and transcribed verbal notes regarding his representation of Trump in the Mar-a-Lago probe, according to a source familiar with the matter. Corcoran previously testified and declined to answer some questions, citing attorney-client privilege. Prosecutors are also seeking access to notes from Corcoran. You're going down a dangerous road that you don't want to go down. I'm telling you right now, D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, with a liberal bent to you, persecuting a political enemy, there is still time to come out and say, we screwed up. We're not going to pursue this. And you might want to do that. I'm telling you right now, this is not a road you want to go down. Where you go through some of the most sacred conversations in relation to the Justice Department. A person should feel secure talking to his lawyer. That's why we have lawyers. Whether he's guilty or not. Without that lawyer being compelled to spill everything. This is not a road that you want to go down on this one. Trust me, find another way or you will regret this in the future. I promise you. Alright, and with that, we are done talking about the Orange Man, finally. Let's grab one from Reuters, Fed in the Spotlight with U.S. focused on stability, First Republic. From Napur Anand. U.S. authorities are set to explore ways to bolster financial stability along with steps to tackle the problems facing First Republic, as central banks ponder whether the recent banking sector turmoil makes interest rates less pressing. With market volatility easing, Wednesday's Federal Reserve meeting is firmly in focus, with traders split over whether the U.S. Central Bank will be forced to pause its hiking cycle. The Fed, whose relentless rate hikes rein in inflation, are among factors blamed for the biggest banking sector meltdown since the 2008 financial crisis, is tipped to raise rates by 25 basis points, half the 50 basis points move foreseen before the shakeup. European Central Bank top brass said on Wednesday they will watch for signs of stress in bank lending, a day after the ECB warned banks not to be caught off guard by rising rates. Investors are wondering whether the ECB will be able to continue hiking to fight inflation, but its chief economist, Philip Lane, said market jitters may turn out to be a non-event for monetary policy, while a full-blown crisis that completely rewrites the outlook is unlikely. We always run scenarios about what happens when the accelerator affects or things amplify each other, but that's pretty much a tail scenario at this point in time, Lane said. Speaking before Lane, ECB President Christine Lagarde said the ECB's interest rate hikes could be magnified if banks become more risk-averse and start demanding higher rates when lending, implying the central bank may need to do less. Yeah, they're going to keep trying to do this and trying to get the central bank to do less, because one thing, by the way, the Biden admin would love to see is both the ability for them to spend their money and the ability for people to do bread and circuses. It's getting harder and harder to convince the people that everything is great and everything is fine and don't worry about it and just go out and spend that money and buy that house and buy that car. When even with people having rising rates right now, having rising wages, can't go out and afford to do this kind of stuff. So, the Biden admin would love to see just no interest rate whatsoever, no interest rate hike, bring it back down to zero, and have people go back and spend, and have bread and circuses. But I don't think that's a reality for anybody right now. From ABC, some foreign news for you guys. Xi departs Putin meeting after signaling strength in Russia-China alliance. From Carson Yu and Kevin Shelby. President Xi Jinping departed Moscow on Wednesday after 2 days of highly symbolic meetings with Russian President Vladimir Putin, in which the two presented a united front and an alternative vision for global leadership. Much of the summit seemed to be directed at countering narratives from the United States, NATO, and other nations that have stood against Putin's invasion of neighboring Ukraine more than a year ago. Despite statements saying that China-Russia relations are not the kind of military-political alliance during the Cold War, China and Russia made clear that they wanted to advance the trend toward a multipolar world. This highly publicized summit may reflect a shift towards the new and more active role for China, as it seizes the opportunity to to convey diplomatic and possibly tangible support for Russia and any other state that wishes to defy the West. Michael Butler, Associate Professor of Political Science at Clark University, told ABC News. Joint animosity toward the US-led world order has kept Russia and China close. Despite Putin's war in Ukraine and Western sanctions against Russia, has made China the biggest customer and economic lifeline. Russia became energy hungry, China's top oil supplier in January and February, supplanting Saudi Arabia. China's nationalist tabloid Global Times hailing energy as a ballast stone in the two nations' trade relationship. During their meetings, Putin committed to deliver at least 98 billion cubic meters of liquefied gas annually to China by 2030, which is 6 times higher than they sold to China last year, but still below what Russia used to deliver to Europe. And by the way, they're still sending to Europe. Ahead of the summit, a White House spokesperson John Kirby dismissed the warming China-Russia ties as a marriage of convenience. Yeah, but a marriage of convenience still produces kids and a joint income. Just saying. But it stands in stark contrast to Beijing's increasingly frosting relationship with Washington. Beijing increasingly sees Russia as a necessary ally as China and the US continue to fall out over numerous fronts, but not limited to Taiwan and access to semiconductors. It was further exacerbated by the spy balloon episode earlier this year. While Xi and China may not have voiced strong support in the war in Ukraine, having the West's resources focused on the conflict may represent a net positive for Beijing, said Zev Fantouche, a senior intelligence analyst at Global Guardian, an international security firm. Now, there's more going on with this, by the way. And something to point out is that there are rumors, I've not been able to confirm or corroborate at this point, but there have been rumors that China just brokered a peace deal between Sunnis and Shiites in Saudi Arabia, and is now planning on having Saudi Arabia settle their oil debts in yuan rather than the US dollar. There are big problems happening for the US's hegemony in the world. And that's something we need to pay attention to and think about. Now, we'll always have the CIA trying to strain relationships with people, but I don't know how much they can do that, especially with the balloon incident and a number of other things. We will see. We'll keep watching this and see what happens, but this might be the time to just get at least a little bit nervous. CNN's 5 takeaways. No path to peace, 5 key takeaways from Xi and Putin's talks in Moscow. From Simone McCarthy. Let's skip right ahead to the takeaways. No meaningful path forward on Ukraine. The meetings yielded no breakthrough on resolving the conflict in Ukraine. That's partially because the US is continuing to push Ukraine to fight no matter what. Both leaders called for the cessation of actions that increase tensions and prolong the war in Ukraine. According to their joint statement released by China's foreign ministry, the statement did not acknowledge that Russia's invasion and military assault were the cause of ongoing violence and humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. Leaders also urged NATO to respect the sovereignty, security interests of other countries, a reference that appeared to echo long-standing rhetoric from both countries, falsely blaming the Western Security Alliance for provoking Russia to invade. That's not what provoked Russia to invade. Yeah, there was some tension there, but again, I still don't necessarily believe that any of this was any more than the Donbass region petitioning Russia to help them take their independence. And Zelensky saying, "No, we cannot lose our territory. You stay in Ukraine." New World Order in alignment against the US. Experts say that China and Russia's inclination to build their alignment against the US and a world order more suited to their own autocratic agendas was driving the meeting, not interest in resolving the conflict in Ukraine. As Xi left with the Kremlin following a state dinner on Tuesday with Putin, his parting message reiterated his view that the global power dynamics are shifting. Together we shall push forward these changes that have not happened for 100 years. Take care, he said during a goodbye handshake with Putin, alluding to what Xi sees as an era where the West is fading and China is ascendant. In their joint statement, the two authoritarian leaders called for promoting a multipolar world, a buzzword for a system not so led by the so-called Western values and rules, and pledged to work together to safeguard the international system and the UN, where the two have a track record of blocking motions, including against actors like North Korea. Military mutual trust and defense ties, perceived threats from bodies like NATO and AUKUS, a security pact comprised of Australia, UK, and US, emerged as a clear focus for both leaders, including their implications on Asia. Xi and Putin both expressed serious concerns in their joint statement about NATO's continuous strengthening of military security ties with Asia-Pacific countries, and said they oppose external military forces undermining regional peace and stability. Economic and energy boost. Putin said Tuesday Moscow is ready to support the Chinese business, replacing Western enterprises that left Russia since the start of his invasion in Ukraine. Russia's grown increasingly reliant on China as both an import market and an exporter of electronics after being slapped with sweeping sanctions. The partners appeared poised to expand what has already been a surge in energy trade over the past year as Europe cut its reliance on Russia's key resource. Both leaders also say they will build a closer energy partnership, supporting companies from both countries in advancing cooperation projects in oil, gas, coal, electricity, and nuclear energy. Putin, in comments to media, added that further growth in Russia gas exports to China was discussed, including implementation of the initiative to build the Power of Siberia 2 gas pipeline through the territory of Mongolia. And divided world, which, that in and of itself is starting to tell me, hey, are we going to another either Cold War or World War? The optics of the Moscow summit was in deep contrast to the coinciding meeting in Ukraine between Zelensky and Kishida. Zelensky praised Kishida and other leaders who have visited, showing respect for not only Ukraine, but for the preservation and functioning of civilized rules and civilized life in the world. Given Japan's strength, its leadership in Asia, defending peace and the rules-based international order, and Japan's responsibility as the Group of Seven chair, our talks today can truly yield global result, he said in a nightly address on Tuesday. She has yet to speak with Zelensky since the Russian invasion began, though a senior Ukrainian official told CNN Tuesday that discussions are underway between the two countries to organize a call between them about China's resolution proposal with nothing concrete scheduled. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, if China smooths over Russia and Ukraine, this country is fucked on the world stage. Because the tensions coming off of Ukraine would lead Europe to be less averse to taking Russian oil and gas. And meanwhile, again, the US has been hell-bent on keeping this conflict going. And the entire world knows it, too. This is something to watch. Even more than the circus that's going on in Manhattan right now. And also, by the way, on top of that, if BRICS takes off and oil starts getting traded in the yuan rather than the US dollar, there's going to be some problems in this country. On the drone, Russia reportedly recovers some debris from U.S. drone downed in the Black Sea, from Mark Moore in the New York Post. Moscow has recovered parts of a surveillance drone the U.S. had to down in the Black Sea last week after an encounter with Russian jet fighters, according to a report on Wednesday. Hey, Mr. Scott came in. Neat. Russian military conversations between personnel on ships and an aircraft discussing the MQ-9 Reaper were captured by radio hobbyists beginning about 8 hours after the drone was damaged after being struck by a Russian fighter jet, the New York Times reported. No, I haven't. Throw a link in the Discord. We'll probably talk about that tomorrow. When was that? The audio recordings picked up by the hobbyists while monitoring public airwaves indicate the debris, including parts of the engine's case, nose and wing, and gas tank, were recovered. East High, isn't that the school from High School Musical? There's no signs the Russians were able to retrieve any sensitive technology, but the reports point out that the recordings contain audio interference and military code words that make them hard to understand. MQ-9 drones use mainly to gather intelligence, often carry an array of high-tech components, including sensors, communications equipment, and precision weapons. But Mark Milley said last week the military took mitigating measures to ensure that valuable intelligence would not be recovered by foreign actors. He also noted the $30 million drone crashed in international waters in the Black Sea that were about 4,000 to 5,000 feet deep, making any recovery extremely difficult, but not impossible. On Wednesday, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov addressed the downing of the MQ-9, warned that the U.S. drone fights in Russia-restricted airspace over the Black Sea will provoke countermeasures. He said the U.S. should not have entered the area designated off-limits as part of its special military operation, which is how Russia characterizes its invasion of Ukraine. The Americans demonstratively, cynically, and outright in public form deny the legitimacy of these steps and state intentions to continue actions of this kind. They are, as saying goes, asking for countermeasures, and we warn them against attempts to play on nerves and test patience, Rybakov said, according to Russian news site TASS. In any case, Russia's security will be 100% ensured by all means available to us, and no American drones, be them reconnaissance, strike, strategic, whatever other UAVs, can shake our determination, he continued. So, they have it. Reuters reporting Black Sea drones show U.S. involvement in conflict against Russia, says Kremlin. The U.S. drone flights over the Black Sea are a sign of direct U.S. involvement in conflict with Russia, Kremlin said. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov was quoted as saying on Sunday. It is quite obvious what these drones are doing, and their mission is not at all peaceful mission to ensure safety in shipping in international waters. Interfax news agency quoted Peskov as saying in a TV interview. And in fact, we are talking about direct involvement of operators of drones in conflict and against us. You might have a point. I mean, we don't have a real big track record in this country of staying out of it either, so do keep that in mind. And this is not pro-Putin propaganda either, by the way, when I say that. That's not at all what this is. This is me pointing out that you're flying around, gathering intelligence, in a war zone or just outside of a war zone, be it as it may, for a conflict that you have had a vested interest in since it began. And the last one on that one. White House's Kirby blasts Russia for awarding pilots behind U.S. drone crash. At best, just an idiot. From Louis Cassiano. The Biden admin blasted Russia for honoring 2 pilots for downing a U.S. drone in international airspace, while saying the aviator who crashed into the drone was at best just an idiot. Well, he landed, and your drone didn't. Keep that in mind. Last week, the Kremlin issued a state award to fighter jet pilots responsible for downing the U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone over the Black Sea earlier this week, in the week prior. In an official statement, the Ministry of Defense commended the pilots for preventing the drone from violating the boundaries of the temporary airspace regime established by the special military operation. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby spoke with reporters Wednesday about the matter while making fun of the Russian government for portraying the pilots as heroes. I don't know any other military in the world, another air force in the world, would award a pilot for smashing into a drone. He said during a White House press briefing, if that's bravery, I guess they have a different definition of it. Russia said the drone was flying with the transponders off. Kirby said U.S. officials didn't know if the pilot intentionally crashed, but he did. And again, I will remind you that that pilot got down in one piece and went home. Your drone is at the bottom of the Black Sea, with possibly having its munitions blown up to keep intelligence from getting to the Russians. And in another potential flashpoint under the Brandon admin, Scoop, Iran enriching uranium above 60% could trigger strike, Israeli official says. That's right, another foreign power wants us involved in their conflict. From Barak Ravid, author of Axios from Tel Aviv. Israel told the Biden admin and several European countries that Iran would be entering dangerous territory that could trigger an Israeli military strike if it enriches uranium above the 60% level, a senior Israeli official told Axios. Increasingly concerned about advances in Iran's nuclear program, Israel has in recent months ramped up its private and public threats of military action against Tehran in an apparent attempt to deter the country from escalating its nuclear program even further. Iran has amassed 87.5 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, according to an International Atomic Energy Agency report from late February. Experts say that the uranium is enriched to 90% weapons grade. It would be sufficient quantity to produce at least one nuclear bomb. The IAEA is continuing to investigate Iranian activity in its underground nuclear facility in Fordo, which included enriching at least small amounts of uranium to 84% purity. Israel, however, doesn't consider the small amounts of uranium enriched at 84% as meaningful because Tehran didn't amass any of the material at that level, the Israeli official said. A top U.S. defense official told lawmakers last month Iran will only need 12 days to enrich enough weapons grade to build one nuclear bomb, though the U.S. has also said it doesn't believe Iran has made the decision to resume its weaponization program. Yeah. But again, of course, Israel is coming out and saying, hey, come back here and fight our war for us. We could strike. It could happen. You wouldn't want something to happen to us, would you? U.S., Biden, Congress. So we'll keep watching that one. Back onto our side of the ocean. From the blaze, Louisiana Dems switched parties after nearly 50 years in politics, cites Christian values as reason. And I will give Mr. Scott some credit for this one. This one is a couple days old. But my aggregators only popped this one up today, so when I did go back and research the article for it, I found that it was 2 days old already. From Courtney Wheel, the longest serving member of Louisiana State Legislature, has officially switched parties from Democrat to Republican. On Friday, Francis Thompson was changed his registration to Republican after serving as Democrat for nearly 48 years. Thompson was first elected in 1974 and spent the next 32 years in the State House. He then served 12 years in the State Senate before returning to the House for another 4 years. Term limits when, please? No, I don't like term limits. I would rather upstarts come up and have big primaries for these seats rather than term limits. My conservative voting record over my years in the legislature speaks for itself, the 81-year-old retired college professor and businessman stated, adding that he made the switch primarily because of his Christian faith. Based. The push past several years by Democrat leadership on both the national and state level to support certain issues does not align with these values and principles that are part of my Christian life, Thompson said. Based. That is so based. Yeah, I don't know how a lot of people can still be Christian and support the current Democrat Party as it is. Supposedly a lot of people do it. I don't understand how. Because a major amount of their platform stands against what gets talked about in the Lutheran Church, in the Wells Synod. I mean, I'm not the kind of person to tell you what you can do with your own religion. I'm saying, you claim to be Christian and you support the killing of babies. I have questions. They may never get answered. A little bit of a laugh at Nikki Fried. This will be a short one. Nikki Fried takes aims at Ron DeSantis. Piers Morgan levels her. From Virginia Cruta. Florida Democrat Party Chair Nikki Fried, who is no longer the Agriculture Secretary, took aim at DeSantis after he sat down for an interview with Piers Morgan for his show Piers Morgan Uncensored. Fried's tweet, March 21st, Ron DeSantis retreated to a flipping Piers Morgan interview to try to save his failing campaign. Ba ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ba ha 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 ha. Morgan fired back. Like this. No disrespect, but if I were a Florida Democrat, I'd probably avoid talking about failing campaigns when it comes to a guy who just flatlined you. Although, technically, that's not true. Because it wasn't DeSantis that killed Freed's career, it was Charlie Crist. Because she stood absolutely no chance against Crist. From the Hill. Some good news for once. Bipartisan lawmakers introduced bill to ban members from owning and trading stocks. Will this go anywhere? Probably not. But the fact that it's being talked about, and I will give credit where credit is due, the people that are involved in this are not people that I give credit to very often. From Michael Schnell. A bipartisan group of lawmakers introduced a bill on Tuesday that seeks to ban members of Congress from owning and trading stocks, the latest piece of legislation put forward in the effort to enact a stock trading ban for Congress. A number of lawmakers from both parties and chambers introduced legislation in the last Congress to ban members from trading stocks while in office, but none of the proposed measures passed. The effort gained steam after news surfaced that several lawmakers had violated existing laws meant to prevent conflicts of interest when it comes to investing. Which, by the way, I will point out the fact that this seems to be pointed out by what the Hill just said, is you can have the law up there, but who's going to enforce it unless there's very partisan impeachment that comes with it? They're still going to do this, one way or another. They're still going to get rich off stocks that they can control. But the fact that the effort is being made is pretty based. The House came close to holding a vote on legislation barring lawmakers from trading stocks in September 2022. But Democratic leadership, Pelosi, ultimately scrapped those plans, saying there was not enough time to study the proposal. Pelosi. The decision angered some lawmakers who had hoped to vote on the legislation, which is popular among voters ahead of the midterm elections. The newest measures included introduced by Pramila Jayapal, Matt Rosendale, and Ken Buck, which I do not give a lot of credit to Pramila Jayapal, but when she does one right, she knocks it out of the park. When she does something I agree with, she does it something that I agree with so much that I can't help but say, good job, Pramila. And I don't say those words very often. Would prohibit lawmakers and their spouses from owning or trading individual stocks, commodities, futures, and other securities, including interest in hedge funds, derivatives, options, or other complex investment vehicle. The ban would not, however, extend to common, widely held funds such as mutuals and ETFs, which is kind of fine, because they should still, especially if they have a retirement fund out there that they're paying into, they should be able to let that go and be played into the markets like the rest of us, but not on stocks that they directly control. That's the problem. And a broad ETF is a little bit harder to control, unless you find an ETF that has all stocks specifically that your law affects. I still have questions about doing an ETF, but I'm willing to at least hear out the logic behind that one, as those funds do not present a conflict of interest and are diversified according to the lawmakers. I don't know if they're as diversified as you think. Members of Congress are elected to serve the people, not our own financial interests. Those are big words coming from you, Pramila Jayapal. As long as members and their spouses are allowed to trade individual stocks, the door to corruption remains open, Jayapal said in a statement. This legislation is long overdue, necessary to step up to raise the ethical standards of Congress and restore the people's trust in our work. So that is what they are showing for that. Again, don't give a lot to Pramila Jayapal, but when she does one right, she does it right. So credit where credit's due. Again, the enforcement arm would be a difficult bar to clear. You know they're still going to do this if they can get away with it. One out of my state. Ooh, we're out of time just about. Liberal Wisconsin Supreme Court candidate gave no jail time to a man who sexually assaulted a 15-year-old. From Courtney Wheel. The Liberal candidate in the contentious race to fill a vacancy on the Wisconsin Supreme Court is having to defend accusations that she has given some violent offenders light sentences. Though Supreme Court races are officially nonpartisan, yeah, okay. There seems to be a little doubt about the political persuasions of both the candidates. Former Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Dan Kelly was initially appointed to the court in 2016 by Scott Walker. The conservative justice lost re-election in 2020, but is seeking to return. Kelly's opponent, Milwaukee County Judge Janet Protasiewicz, has collected hundreds of thousands of dollars for her campaign, much of it from out-of-state Democrats and their supporters. Protasiewicz has professed support for so-called abortion rights and argued in overturning Roe, the U.S. Supreme Court ignored the will of the people. However, Protasiewicz has largely been criticized for the light sentences she's issued to some violent offenders. For example, in September, Kenneth Wright, of 28, pled guilty to third-degree sexual assault after he kidnapped a 15-year-old, raped her, continued a sexual relationship with her, and eventually impregnated her. At his sentencing, Wright expressed no remorse and may have even blamed the victim and her parents for the assaults. Despite the horrific details of the crime and Wright's lack of contrition, Protasiewicz gave him no jail time. But for COVID, I would be giving you some house of correction time, she said at sentencing. These are strange times, Mr. Wright, and I'm not going to do that. Which is a shame because I know where he would have gone. And I hate to say this, but I don't hate to say this. I think this is perfect. If he'd have gone there with this record, there would be no more Mr. Wright. He would be no more. That light sentence had deadly consequences less than a year later. Wright was driving under the influence in Milwaukee when he hit a speed of over 80 in a 30 and crashed into his vehicle. The force of the crash caused Wright's passenger, Jamira Doyle, to be ejected from the vehicle. She was pronounced dead at the scene, and Wright later pled guilty to reckless homicide. In 2017, Jovian Reese, then 18, raped his cousin after she fell asleep while at his home. She awoke during the assault and ran to report it to her sister. Though Reese initially denied the accusations, her DNA was found on his penis, and his DNA was discovered on her breasts. In March of 2019, Reese's sentencing for third-degree sexual assault. Protasiewicz apparently doubted that she claims the victim made in her impact statement, and instead seemed to treat the crime as a possible learning opportunity. Are you a danger to the public? I don't think so, she said to Reese. I mean, I don't think that you did anything other than engage in a crime of opportunity, and hopefully you've learned your lesson. During a recent debate, when Kelly cited these examples and others to demonstrate Protasiewicz's soft-on-crime approach, Protasiewicz accused Kelly of lying and requested to see court transcripts because that certainly doesn't sound like anything that I would do. Let's listen.
Your thought process in making those sentences?
Every single case, you look at the serious nature of the crime, the need to protect the public, and the character of the defendant. That is what case law tells you to look at. That is what I evaluate in each and every case.
Justice Kelly, your response.
There's a case, a man raped a 15-year-old. Came to you for sentencing. You said no prison time at all because COVID. There's no way that COVID provides a get-out-of-jail-free card for a man who raped a woman. Another man sexually assaulted a 13-year-old child, videoed himself doing it, posted it to Facebook, where it will live forever. Came to you for sentencing. You said no prison.
That's time. Time is up. Judge Protase, would you like rebuttal time?
I can tell you that sentences take hours, sometimes half a day, sometimes a day. There is no way I would have said in any case, you're not going to prison. COVID. That's an outright lie. I can tell you each and every case where I have sentenced someone, I have evaluated all of the pertinent factors very, very carefully. I'll also tell you in sexual assault cases, those are challenging cases. Those victims frequently don't want to come to court. There are frequent recantations. It's a sophisticated area of law to work in as a judge.
Well, again, we have receipts for this. So, and sadly enough, just by the fact, and again, that she is heavily funded by out-of-state Democrats and also progressive groups in Madison and Milwaukee, there's a better than 0% chance that she wins. In fact, I would put the odds at almost 55% in her favor. Kind of wish that the GOP, even though this is supposed to be a nonpartisan race, would have put somebody other than Dan Kelly up, who has already lost this seat once. But the decisions have been made. I'm a little bit iffy on Dan Kelly myself, but he is the lesser of two evils here. We got time for a couple more. Well, we've got one more. I can put these last two on things I like and things that I hate for tomorrow. So we'll do one more. Howard Stern says Jon Stewart would win in a slam dunk if he ran for president. Yes, Howard Stern, who hasn't been relevant for almost 20 years. From Judy Kurtz. Howard Stern says Jon Stewart would win in a slam dunk if he were to run for president, as he urged the former Daily Show host to launch a White House bid on Monday. If President Biden chose not to run for election, Stern said on his eponymous SiriusXM show, then he figured out who should run for president on the Democrat side. His name is Jon Stewart. That guy is so fucking smart and bright, and also witty and really measured when he takes on a debate. Stern told listeners about the Apple TV Plus, the problem with Jon Stewart host. Yeah, he knows how to talk, and he would work his ass off to be a good president, Stern, 69, said. And I'm telling you, he could also win, because people like Jon Stewart, Stern said, noting how Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky was a comedic actor before entering the political world. That is probably not what you should hinge your argument on. Praising Stewart's advocacy work on Capitol Hill, Stern said, "Remember when John went to Congress and lobbied for the 9/11 first responders? Watch when he talks to politicians and confronts them," Stern said. "Watch the guy. He just makes a lot of good points. He owes it to his country. The guy would be terrific, and I think he'd do it." A Stewart rep didn't immediately return ITK's request for comment about Stern's presidency push. This is like talking about Reagan being president in '85 to somebody in 1955. Like, okay, Jon Stewart's now the president. Who's the Secretary of Defense? Jerry Lee Lewis? No, what did they put Colbert up as? Where am I going with this? Colbert up as vice president? Trevor Noah's your foreign dignitary? Triumph the Insult Dog is your Secretary of Defense? Like, seriously? And I mean, it's not like Jon Stewart doesn't know politics. And he is a lot more moderate than a lot of other people that could be put up. But realistically, I mean, these are two washed up has-been former shock people who were out there to piss off the olds. Who are now olds who think that they need to be in charge. Alright, that's all that I have for news for the day. We are going to head out of here for the day. But before we do, I always try to go a little bit lighthearted on the end of this and talk about something, something a little bit personal, something that, restores my faith in humanity, something that I'm thankful for. There's always a lot. There's always a lot to be thankful for around here. And it's everything has been looking way up just since. I hate the fact that I'm in and doing this at night instead of early in the morning like I used to. That morning time slot was gold. I took that for granted for as long as I did. Waking up late and sometimes not starting until 7:45. I took that so for granted, and I miss that. There might be an opportunity for me to grab that, but I don't know how it's going to go at this point. But what I can say with this, when I look at what's changed around here and opportunity and the fact that we're here, like a week ago today, I thought that I had tanked my channel completely. I did. I got mad on a live stream a week and a half ago while we were doing video games because, in spite of the fact that I do draw being closer to center than most of the newscasters out there, I mean, compared to Anderson Cooper and especially like Rachel Maddow, but even some of the people on Fox, I am a far-right extremist compared to some of those people. Even though I'm relatively moderate in the way that I want to see people treated. I'm anti-government, number one, and number two, while I keep conservative in my own household and my own way of doing things, I have no interest on imposing those ideas onto others. You're grown-ups, you can make your own decisions. Don't come to me for help when you screw up. I'll help you privately, but I won't use the government to do it. But that has brought a certain number of people, and we've been talking about this for over a week now. Because I got mad, because I've got one person, and I know that this is part of the reason we lost Ron, but I had one person, and it was not Ron Helton, who would do nothing but come in and start spewing anti-Israel rhetoric constantly. And if not anti-Israel, then anti-black. I am neither of those things. But I watched the numbers here. We hit 6 today, which means we're getting back onto a kin, not only with losing some of our core audience, but we're getting back to the regular viewership of the morning show, and that means that we've got opportunity to increase, especially if I do go back to going early mornings again, which some things are working down the pipe, and some of this may actually happen in the near future. But with that being said, with that being done, and with going through some of these things, I see the viewership here, and I mean the chatter is not as active as it was with Ron Helton here. Because he could get people going. He really could. Whether he agreed with him or he didn't agree with him, Ron Helton could get people going. But what I can say here is the fact that the numbers are staying the same as where they were means that, yes, I can actually stand up for myself and express myself and my views, whether they be in contention with everybody else, and still garner an audience, and still have people that, like, at this time last week, I was starting to question whether or not I was shutting the channel down or going back to video gaming. And the response that I've had over the last week has shown me that no, Contemporary is here for at least a little while longer. It may be a little bit slower to start off in the beginnings, but I'm not dejected anymore. I'm not black-pilled anymore. So I'm thankful for you, the audience, the people who have come in here, and the replays too, by the way. I've been watching the replays on, I've not been watching the replays personally, but I've been watching the numbers on the replays on both the backup channel and the main channel, which, by the way, yeah, we lost the main channel for a day. That's the other thing I'm thankful for. YouTube got their heads out of their asses and took my strike away from me. Otherwise, we'd still be on the backup channel. But I can still be me, and you guys will still come in here and listen. And I'm thankful for that. I really thought that I was going to have to go pretend to be a far-right extremist to garner an audience, and that's not me. I can't do that. I can't. Because I don't believe that. I never have, and I never will. I will give you as objective and as straight news as I can. Yes, I do have my own spin on it, and it mostly comes from being anti-government. But I will continue to be as objective and fair and balanced as I can be, being one person without a production or a writing team. Yes, my own opinion seeps into the news. But I'll continue to do this. Again, as long as one person watches, this will continue to be here. Your nightly news, 5 days a week. And with that, we're out of here. Where's the outro music? I don't have to change the scene. We already changed the scene. Alright, so thank you everybody who came by, chatted in the live chat, and kept those numbers up today. That's been an awesome day. I'm going to get out of here because I smell horrible, and I can see already because I've got I don't know if I can stream out in 1080 because of limitations on my YouTube account, but I can look over here because I can, like, OBS is picking up in 4K. Jesus, I need a shower. My hair is so greasy, it's not even funny. But we're out of here. We'll be back here tomorrow to talk about things that I like and things that I hate, including some of the things on the tail end of the show. Looking forward to seeing that. Looking forward to seeing you guys here tomorrow and on the replays too, by the way. I see you guys who watch the replays, and I'm thankful for you too. So come back in, join me tomorrow to see what happens in the next 22 hours of news. And until then, be good, behave, get out there, be active, and vote. Don't get yourself arrested. And we will see you tomorrow. And until then, I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.